Happy New Year and welcome to Conversations. I'm your host, Charles Kirkland Jr. I'm so glad you could join me in the dollhouse. I'm not in my regular studio today, but this is going to be fun because I have someone with me. You know, I love to do the Filmmaker of the Month, and this month I have with me a person who's a storyteller, a real storyteller, using words and dance to captivate her audiences from an early age. She started her journey in the arts at the prestigious College of William and Mary, and she went on from there to Howard University. But in between, she's done things with Sony Pictures. She's worked with the National Black Programming Consortium. I mean, she's worked on movies. Let's look at the list: Contact, Starship Troopers, Godzilla, X-Men 2, Garfield, Sky Captain, World of Tomorrow, The Avengers, and Man of Steel. So she's Marvel and DC, and she works in the visual effects area of digital production management and digital producing, and it's just exciting because she's worked with James Cameron, with Lightstorm Entertainment, spent a lot of time in Los Angeles, Ohio, and now she's back here in DC, and we're just excited for her to be the Filmmaker of the Month for the month of January. Welcome to the show, Audrea Tops Harjo. How you
Thank you.
doing?
Thank you very much. Happy New Year. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I, Before we get into everything else, I think the first question I like to ask everyone when they come on as the Filmmaker of the Month is, what does it mean to be named the Filmmaker of the Month for January for DC, from DC? How does that feel for you?
It's amazing. You know, film has always been my first love, and DC has been my home. Like I grew up here, and it's just such an honor to be recognized by your home city, and I just to be over the moon. I mean, DC is such a wealth of talent, and to be recognized among them is just really exciting, and I'm so appreciative.
We're ecstatic to have someone with you with such the resume that you have, and working in, I mean, in the digital production, visual effects. How is that different from, I'd say, just, I mean, because you started out just doing theater, you've done theater, you've done all kinds of things. What drew you to visual effects?
The funny thing is, you know, in all honesty, eating. I had to eat. The beauty of it is, you know, I was always, you know, I always worked in first unit filmmaking. You know, my classmates at Howard University will tell you I was the one who was organized. Edgar Davis, who was in grad school with me, we were in LA, and I threw a party when I came back from working in overseas for a bit. He's like, she was one with the clipboard and not playing and just organized all the time. And I got that from theater, you know, because theater, you have to be, you know, very, very organized to do that. And I was just a naturally organized kid. I read incessantly. I put all the books together in order of genre and author, and I had little note cards to kind of give my own like book reviews, and I read everything Anne Rice had ever written, everything Stephen King had ever written, everything Ken Follett. Like I was really an avid reader because I couldn't read for a little bit, and I learned that I was a little bit of a overachiever, as you would say, but I had an incredible memory. I told this story before that my mom I convinced my mom that I could read because I'd memorized all the books in our library just by color and picture. And so it wasn't until like the second grade that she realized that I couldn't read. The teacher had to tell her. She goes, "What are you talking about?" But I had memorized all the books. And so I just took that memory and
Wow.
organization, and you know, I was determined to kind of not pretend anymore and actually do the thing. And I think that grit really propelled me, and I kind of set the tone as even a little kid of being really serious. And honestly, Charles, I was never a little kid. I'm gonna be honest. I was a little baby adult. I was a little Dakota Fanning. Like I was just never a kid. And so I took that organization from theater to filmmaking first unit, and I was the first AD UPM, which is in charge of logistics and strategy for film. And at Howard, you had to do all the jobs. So you had to write, you had to direct, you had to produce, you
Hmm.
had to edit, you had to get the film together, you had to do that. I mean, all the jobs. And it was such a great wealth and just a testing ground for what's capable and what you're doing. And at that time, and I always call it the late 1900s, you couldn't there was not really a film. People we DC was amazing with the arts, and we appreciated them. But it was really not a pathway to actual working unless you're just be independent. And I really want to have a little bit more through line than like make a wonderful, huge movie every 10 years. I'm like, I think I'm watching television every single day. I know those people aren't waiting 10 years and make nothing. I'm going to go to LA and I'm going to make a movie. And I had done 3 short films at Howard University, and I wrote them all and directed and edited them all. And my last one, Hard Candy, was nominated for a Student Academy Award that year. And I'm like, you know what? If not now, when? And I convinced my dad to drive across country with me, and he took off for the NetJets plane by the time we got there. And I was in Los Angeles, and I had to start from scratch. I didn't really know anybody. And I met the producer who was starting production. I said I could do anything. He needed a casting assistant, and I got all the actors in and signed them in. And the next day he goes, well, here's our script. I'm like, okay. So of course, me being the overachiever, as we've established, I took the script and I broke it down as any AD would to tell me how many production days of the week. This is where you need the actors, all that great stuff. And he was like, would you like to be our AD? I'm like, yes, I would. So I was AD for him for 3 movies. And then as anything would happen, it's intermittent, and I really need to start over. So I started over in working as a coordinator. I worked at US Animation, was a digital ink and paint house. From there, I was assistant to Zalman King and Butch Kaplan for Red Shoe Diaries. I'm dating myself with David Duchovny before X-Files. And then where I met Jeanette Volturno. And Jeanette Volturno was an amazing producer. She worked for Blumhouse for the last umpteen years. She was one of the producers on Get Out. She was really even Get Up and Go back then. Mm-hmm. And as you know, this business is who you know. So she got a job at Sony Pictures working on James and the Giant Peach. And there were 2 jobs open there. And she said either in software development, software coordination or digital coordination. And rent. So I went to Sony Pictures and went to Sony Pictures and said that I needed to work. And she said, well, do you know anything about C++ or Perl or any of those languages? And I was like, no. She said, well, what do you know how to do? And I'm like, well, I tell people to do really well. And she says, you're hired. I don't know, something about like, she just hired. Yeah. So when I was working at Sony, we were working on 4 pictures at once. It was Cable Guy, Phenomenon, Ghosts in the Darkness, The Craft, Anaconda, the JLo version. And so I really had to learn all the technology on the fly. I was able to take out each individual engineer to lunch and say, hey, exactly what do you do and how do you do it? And I was now responsible for their schedule and being a representative for the department and all the dailies for movies. And people don't understand what dailies are. That's when the visual effects shot is being reviewed by the production team, the artists, and the visual effects supervisor, and they would give notes, and we would have issues if there was any issues that day to take it back and have it fixed. So that was my job for a year. I was made staff, which was amazing because you cannot underestimate health insurance. I was very excited about that. But when a year went by and it was up for review, and I was not an engineer. I always say I just played one on television. I was not a real engineer. I didn't do it. And they asked me if I wanted to become digital production manager for Contact. And of course, I was with Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey. And I was like, sure. And what is that? And they're like, well, you'll have to kind of figure out what that job is. But it basically was being an AD for digital. So I just took those skills of like, how much work is there? How much time do we have? How many resources and and how much time do we have to do all that work? And I was responsible for the digital production pipeline, which means scheduling out all the shots, finding how many resources, processors used, storage space necessary, supporting all the supervisors, supporting the production team as well. We were filming in to film out and all the pipeline in between. We had like 136 artists. Ken Ralston, who had just come down from ILM, who had won an Academy Award for Forrest Gump. He brought his amazing team with him, which is Debbie DeNice, Sheena Dougal, who just finished doing Venom, Jerome Chen, who does Jumanji, Jim Burney, who's now went on to do the Divergent series, and Scott Stockdyke, who actually won an Academy Award for Spider-Man 2, and of course Steven Rosenbaum, who won an Academy Award for the first Avatar. So I had a really incredible team of supervisors and producers I could really learn from, and they were just amazing. And yeah, I did that. We did Contact. It was 3 months, 7 days a week. We gave shots to a little company called Weta back in the day, and after that I went on to work with Sheena's department, high speed compositing for Starship Troopers. And then I worked facility for a little bit and worked on Godzilla, as you talked about, the Matthew Broderick one, and worked on the first Spider-Man with Sam Raimi for a little bit. And then I started to get a little antsy because now, after Stuart Little, of course, I was starting to get a little antsy and wanted to go back to live action. And so I decided to make a martial arts movie, as people would. Why not? Why not make a martial arts movie? So a funny story was that, I became obsessed with Jet Li, and as luck would have it, this is a day in the forum before Facebook and online, all that stuff. It was just forums and people like showing their love, and people talking to each other all around the world, and found his group, met a young screenwriter from UCLA. I brought him over to Sony Pictures to come visit me, and we hit it off great. And he went back and he said, I work for Jet Li. I'm like, of course you do. So he was Jet Li's writer.
Oh, wow.
I met his assistant, Beaver Kwai was his assistant. And I said, you know what, we're working on Hollow Man at the time. Kevin Bacon was in it, and Josh Brolin. And, it was so great that we were doing like all of the internal work. Scott Anderson was a supervisor at the time. Just amazing work those guys did. And I said, I'd really, really great if Jet would come over and visit. And he's like, okay, Jet's coming. And I'm like, oh my God. So Jet Li came to Sony Pictures to see me. It was just so great. And people were like flipping out that I was able, because I was showing like Fist of Legend before dailies. Like, it was a huge joke, because I was just showing and all of a sudden it's like walking into the studio because it's LA, and he was doing Lethal Weapon 4 at the time and doing all Roman Must Die. There's all these great things. So yeah, I was able to hang with Jet's camp for about a year. We made a martial arts movie with his writer and one of the stunt guys, who ended up being his assistant on Hero. And just so amazing. Like, I think I was able to use the costumes from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, because it was all Sony, right? And we shot in Hollywood Hills. I was able to get Hosang Pak, who was the original Liu Kang for Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
I was able to get TJ Storm, who's a huge motion capture actor. He was Godzilla, actually. He does a lot of motion capture work right now for games. He's great artist and martial artist. And we just did it. I think I had one of my the DP was from Howard University, and we had this China Howard kind of connection going on in the middle of Trinity. It was amazing. So we went around for festivals. I got to go to Acapulco Black Film. It was Acapulco then, Black Film Festival, and I got to tour it around. And my director actually got to work on Hero with Jet, so he was gone for a couple of years doing that. And I definitely felt like Dionne Warwick without Burt Bacharach, right? I'm like, what am I gonna do? I lost my director. So I took time off, became a mom. Went back to work in LA with my daughter in tow to work on X-Men 2 and Sky Captain and Garfield. Left Garfield and went to, I think that team was going to go work on Superman Returns, actually, with Bryan Singer, because that team had just finished working with him on X-Men 2. And I had to start over, worked in games. So I worked in console games for 6 years at Electronic Arts and EA. and I ended up being head of North American production and deployment for mobile. And at that point in time, Weta Digital at the time called me. Cindy Oates, I worked with at Sony Pictures. She was now kind of head producer over at in Wellington, and she called and said, "Hey, we have a position open for creature department manager. Would you like to come? And you know of anybody?" I'm like, "Well, I think I'll be interested. You know, I've been here for a while, and it's time for a change of scenery." She goes, "Are you free?" I'm like, "Sure." So they flew me to New Zealand for 48 hours, and I felt like James Bond, right? I put my little baby to like gave it to like the teacher. "Can you please get her to school for me?" And I came back. They offered me the job, and my daughter and I just went to New Zealand, and we were there for 2.5 years. I think when I landed, James Cameron and John Landau were actually throwing a cast and crew party in New Zealand for the team because they just finished it. And so it's so funny. So my first party was like the Avatar party, and I worked on 1010, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and Prometheus. I mean, it was just a blur. I worked on 9 movies in 2.5 years, what I would not recommend. It was really, really hard, and it was hard. Left there, you know, I got a little burnout again, as you do when you work that crazy. And I went to talk to Joe Lettieri, and he's like, you know, it's like, well, thank you, Joe. Thank you so much for all your hard, you know, for giving me a chance. He's like, you're welcome, Audrea. He goes, what do you want to do now? I'm like, well, you know, I'm really good at working with brilliant people, and I really love working. He goes, how about James Cameron? I'm like, what? Because would you like to work on Avatar? Here we go. So we worked out the Avatar sequels. And so I worked with Lightstorm remotely in New Zealand, and Steven Rosenbaum was back on the crew, and so of course we was like kind of like old reunion because I had worked with him since Sony, and it was really great rapport with him. And worked on I was responsible for a tool, so the tool set was now getting transferred over to the Lightstorm team. So before it was a mishmash, but now it's going to be seamless. So because it was so much complicated before, and they're trying to make it easier. And so I left Weta. I got a call from John Landau, so he wanted to come and work, interview with us. And I did. I interviewed with John Landau, and I met with the team, and they hired me, and I was there for 6 months, hanging out with the writers. So shout out to Amanda Silver and Rick Jaffa, you know, hanging out with those guys, and Sal, and you know, all those amazing people. Left there. My dad had died suddenly, so I came back to work in DC. And met Tressa Smallwood for Megamind Media. She was just starting out.
Yeah.
She started out, she wanted to make a movie, and I wanted to be a consultant, and decided there was a great team and wanted to work with them. So I was there with them like 7 years off and on. I did 3 motion pictures with them, got called to work back in visual effects for Ridley Scott's Raised by Wolves. And then one of the guys I'd hired at Weta 10 years before has his own production, I guess, game studio now. Hired me to help, you know, run production for him. And shortly thereafter, when lockdown happened, I was able to improve his efficiency so much that he made me COO to run his company for him. And I was there until I got super homesick and decided that we need to I missed homes too badly, and I came back. And so now I'm back in the DC DMV, looking forward to making more movies.
I'm just amazed at the pedigree that you have, all the places you've been, Los Angeles, New Zealand. What brought you back to DC? I mean, I heard you talk about you were homesick and you come back. What do you expect to do here in DC that can even come close to what you've done in wherever else?
You know, it's a great question. You know, family is so important. I mean, like, I don't think anybody can understand how isolating it was to be without your family for 2.5 years. I mean, New Zealand was great in a way that we didn't suffer the effects of COVID as much as the rest of the world, but you know, I was a stranger in a strange land, right? You know, one of these things is not like the other. And I would laugh and joke at that when I was there the first time. I would tell them, like, me and my daughter be the only Black chicks in New Zealand except for that chick on Spartacus. And it felt that way. It's like, oh my God. And then you feel it, you know. And my mom had declining health, and so I definitely wanted to come back and support her in any way that I could. and still make magic. And look, I kept getting calls from Don and Tressa saying, "When are you coming back? When are you coming back? We're doing amazing things." And I was like, "I'll be right there." And so I'm back. We're really looking forward to making great things and work with some people. And that's it, because when it comes down to it, like you said, I've done all the things, and I don't really have anything to prove anymore. And being that high profile, there's always a cost to those. And you look back, you're like, okay, you got your name up in lights, and you got a T-shirt and a jacket. Now what? And I decided to come back, and when I was in New Zealand, work on my initiative called Inclusion Effects, which is to amplify underrepresented voices in games and videos, video games and film and television, because there are lots of Black unicorns, right? That's my motto, Black unicorns. We're rare and we have magic, and I wanted to highlight all of them. So, starting with Sheena Dougal and Greg Anderson and Lyndon Barwar, all these amazing, talented people that I've kind of run across. I really wanted to kind of highlight their stories. And so I'm continuing to do that and make movies, with my people, and be at home, but spend time with my mom and my daughter who was without me. She's a grown lady now, but it's nice to be closer, an hour away when she's in college, not so much than 24 hours away in a different time zone. I always felt like I was a time traveler because I was in the future all the time, constantly. That's why I'm happy to be back and contribute so much to the community here.
Well, we're happy to have you back in this area, and the wisdom, the knowledge that you bring to the field. I'm just looking forward to whatever you do, whether it's be with Tressa, who's a good friend of the show, and whomever. Inclusion Effects, I look forward to seeing. And I know I just reviewed Avatar yesterday for the show, and I have to say how visually stunning this film really is, and just amazing work that you guys have done on that series.
Look, I take no credit. That was a 10-year, pre-production. Right. I was only there like in the first third. And I remember John Landau telling me, he goes, Audrea, it's going to be 3 months, 6 years, or 6 months or 10 years. I was like, it can't be 10 years. Are you serious? He was dead on. He said 10 years. And it's so funny. We kept seeing each other. And before I left, I did a talk for the Game Developers Association down in New Zealand. I gave a talk about, lady bosses, and John was talking after me, and he's like, "Oh my God, Audrea!" I gave this big hug. I got to tell the crew I seen you. It's like, "Oh my God, you're following around the world." So you always kind of see those faces. I'm happy for those guys, but that was a long haul, and all the props to all those geniuses that made all that stuff beautiful. I can still break down shots like, oh my God, look at those highlights, and look at that hair, and look at the, and it was so funny. I remember when I would come back to visit some of my old crew, and they were still under wraps about what was going to happen. And I'm like, okay, what water is it? They're like, I'm like, are you kidding? James Cameron likes put people underwater. It has to be water, right? And they're like, we're not at liberty to say. And of course, it's all water.
Yes.
Come on. Titanic, the abyss, going down himself, water. I know that guy. No, it's great.
If someone wanted to get in contact with you, want to work with you in IFX, if they had an idea that they want to push a game development, movie creation, is there a way that they could get in touch with you?
Yeah, Inclusion Effects is a website, inclusioneffects.com. There's a way to reach out for me, there, and see how we can work together. But yeah, that's how you can find me, Inclusion Effects. And you can find me on Instagram and all those things. You can also find me. So funny, actually, I was looking for an actor. I was casting my last game, and I was looking for Dule Hill, and his agent said, "I hear you're looking for Dule Hill." It was via Instagram. She found me. And the details were like, yes, you found me. She goes, "Oh my God, it was so great." He goes, "I hear you looking for us." Like, yes, I am. It was great. So yes.
If Audrea is looking for you, they're going to find you. They're going to get in contact with you. They're like, "Wow, I need to talk to her." Normally I was like, where can people see your work? But your work is everywhere. So it's wonderful that what you're doing, what you have done, and we look forward to what you're going to do next.
Yes, me too. I'm super excited. I'm super excited for what the year has in store for us, and can't wait.
Last thing before we go, are there any shout outs or thank yous that you want to say before we leave?
I want to thank up to Herbert Niles who nominated me for this, and Women in Film has been so great. Melissa over there. I also want to give shout out to my daughter Asia. She's always been supportive of my ride or die. You know, I was wheeling her into the dailies for X-Men. She was the best little kid, just sitting in there. And you know, Tressa Smallwood, Don Lee for Megamind. That team will always have, you know, pure for my heart. And my old HU team, you know who you are, the Derek Allens and Sam Sullivans and Edgar Davis. You guys know who you are. Who's back there in the day. So yeah, those are the ones I want to say. I should give a shout out to.
Well, all I can say, it's been a sincere pleasure having you on the show today. Congratulations again for being the Filmmaker of the Month for January.
Thank you.
And let's stay in contact, because I know I may need some help from you.
Okay. You know where to find me.
All right. Congratulations again.
Thank you. Thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it.
All right.